Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Superhuman Entrepreneur. I am so excited to spend December 19th with you guys because honestly, you could be on the road, you could be with family, but instead you're right here listening to this podcast. What an honor that is. I can't tell you what an honor that is to me and to my guest on the show. I have someone who is quite amazing within the realm of family wellness. I don't know, some of you may or may not have heard of him before. His name is Dr. Joshua Straub, and he is the president and co-founder of the Connection Group, a company equipping military families, businesses, organizations, and churches in family wellness. And I'll tell you, the way I heard about Josh first was we were sitting at a lake house. My family and I were sitting at a lake house, and my brother-in-law took out this book, and he said, "This book is blowing me away. You have to read it." And I started flipping through the pages and reading some of the stuff. And just from flipping through, it did blow me away. It blew me away so much that I contacted Josh maybe a month later, and we started having this dialogue. And now he has come on with us. He's been so gracious to take time out of his holidays to come on with us. But I want to just tell you a little bit more about him. He also serves as marriage and family strategist for Lifeway Christian Resources. Josh is an author and co-author of 4 books, including Safe House, How Emotional Safety is the Key to Raising Kids Who Live, Love, and Lead Well, which is the book that I actually picked up at the lake house. And he's the creator, along with his wife, Christy, of 22/6 Parenting, an online community of parents offering discipleship tools for their kids. Together, they host the In This Together podcast, which is a weekly broadcast equipping today's family. And I can tell you this as well, Josh is an overall superhuman. That's why he's on the show today. Josh, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Man, thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And appreciate that. Appreciate that. With all the stuff that you're doing nowadays, that's an honor for you to say that. And, already we've been able to have some really cool high-level conversation. You're from Nashville. Are you a Nashville Preds fan?
I have grown to be a Nashville Preds fan. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, so okay. I have grown up liking the Flyers and everything, but man, it's hard not to be a Preds fan living in Nashville. I follow them very closely. So
I hear you, man. We were in Murfreesboro, just right down the road, and I'll tell you, man, some of the most hardcore fans. Like I thought, people that were down south, like Southern teams, like Florida State and University of Florida were hardcore. We don't even compare to Nashville Pred fans.
Oh, it's amazing. And the other cool part, I'm married to a Canadian, so I've married into hockey family, into the hockey world. And so I've grown to really love it. It's really cool. So
it is cool. And it absolutely, it's in the blood up there. Everybody plays hockey up there, it seems like.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And I mean, my brother-in-law played professionally and 2 of his brothers played professionally. So I'm learning the ins and outs of hockey in ways that I never thought that I would, but I love the sport. It's great. So
now, are you good on skates?
I am okay on skates. I'm okay.
I'm horrible.
I'm enough to get myself hurt is typically what happens.
Right. Exactly. Same here. Florida kid. Only thing I've ever skated in is an ice rink. And I remember the last time I skated was probably when I was 10, and I literally flew into the glass, like plexiglass wall, and almost knocked myself out. Never attempted it again. That was it for me. So. But,
oh, man.
Well, man, I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I think it's really timely for all of us, being that the holidays can be a really joyful time and it can be a really stressful time for a lot of people. As being a counselor and teaching this stuff, it's a time there's a dichotomy to it. And I think that today you're going to be able to speak into a lot of the challenges that people are dealing with when it comes to raising our kids the right way during not only the holidays, but just year round, keeping our marriages in the center of everything while we do it. And ultimately, keeping a wellness mindset, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves while we serve others and be the best we possibly can for our marriages. So I want to start out just with an abbreviated story, Josh, of how you got to where you are. I think it's really cool that you're equipping military families, businesses, organizations. You have a Facebook Live that you do with your wife, which is awesome. I would encourage everybody out there to go on the Facebook page, Josh's Facebook page, Josh and Christy, and take a look at what they're doing, because we all need someone to speak life into our lives. And you're doing that through your books. You're doing that through your Facebook Live. But tell me how you got to where you are and why you're so passionate about equipping families.
Yeah. One of the big things really for me at the very beginning, and again, I don't want to go into all the details because it could be a long story, but my parents divorced when I was 10. And they have been, even though they went through a divorce, my parents were always there for me. I never questioned whether or not I was loved. And I think there's a big, it's a big reason I was able to be who I am today. However, I got into my early 20s and I was in a counselor. I was in my very first marriage. I'm a counselor. My PhD is in counseling. And I primarily have worked with juvenile delinquents and troubled families throughout most of my counseling career. But in my very first counseling class, we were asked to do a genogram. And a genogram is like a family tree. What it does beyond as a family tree, though, is it looks at patterns in your relational dynamics in your family. It looks at patterns such as, maybe hobbies or jobs. Do I come from a line of doctors, similar to yourself or that type of thing. But deeper than that, it also can look at relational patterns. And what I found was that every single person in my family, from parents or from grandparents to parents to aunts and uncles to my sister who was younger than me, every single person had been divorced at least once and most of them twice. And as I looked deeper, what I found was relational patterns within my family tree that perhaps were the cause of or led to the broken relationships, the broken marriages. And I remember in that moment going, I never want this for myself. The scary part was I was in a dating relationship at the exact same time, and I was carrying out the exact relational patterns that I was seeing in my own family. And I said, man, I've got to get out of this relationship, and I've got to figure out a way to get healthy. And so this was in my early 20s. Over the next 2 years, I went into counseling and broke up with that girl and really began to see some of the patterns that I had carried on into my own life. And excuse me, as I started to see those patterns and as I started to begin to find health for myself, relational health, emotional health, I knew that it changed who I wanted to be as a husband and a father one day. And so I'm counseling and, along comes this Canadian woman that I meet, this beautiful Canadian in grad school. And so we get married, and I'm fast forwarding here a little bit, but when we first became parents, I was 30 by the time we got married. When we first became parents, we were, we had already had a house, we were pretty stable. Our education was pretty well done. And we felt like, okay, we've got this. But what was fascinating was we had terrible infants. I mean, colic, acid reflux, whatever colic is, stomach allergies, all those crazy things, not sleeping. My wife's, we talked about this in a side conversation. My wife's adrenals went down like crazy.
Yeah.
And we just had no idea that it was going to be as difficult as it was. I think it was God humbling us and the thing that we were called to, and that we can have empathy with other parents. And so in addition to that, you have all of these quote unquote experts or people out there forcing you to make decisions with your kid. You can't even leave the hospital before you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to immunize. Breastfeed, bottle feed. Do they sleep with us? Do they not sleep with us? Should we spank? Should we not spank? Should we do time ins or time outs? BPA-free products, organic diets, gluten-free diets. I mean, there's so many decisions we have to make as parents, and it's so overwhelming. And I thought to myself, it's got to be simpler than this. Like when you think about the outcomes that we want in our kids, it's got to be simpler. Not that it's going to make it easier, but we've got to have a filter. And so that's really where Safe House came out of. That was really the heart behind us really doing what we do. And that's why our podcast is called In This Together, because we're saying, hey, we want to be a generation of parents who we have crooked picture frames. The word in this family together is in a crooked picture frame. And the idea is saying, hey, we all have crooked picture frames. We all come from brokenness. We're not perfect, but man, let's do a good job of trying to raise a great generation of kids together. And that's really our heart. And that's really where the story kind of comes from. So
amen and amen, man. That's awesome. Well said. You know, so kudos to that. Like I relate to all of that. And if my wife was here, she would be jumping up and down in the background as well, because we have a lot of stuff thrown at us, especially being a young parent. I know we have a lot of young parents listening out there, you know, that are going through the same stuff and thinking, okay, so like, where do I even begin? Where do I start to get guidance about, you know, everything you just mentioned, you have to put attention toward. Your marriage, you have to put attention toward. Your kids, you have to put attention toward. Your job, all these things. And so how do you stay balanced through all of this? I mean, is balance even the right word? Because there's always things that are gonna come out of the woodwork. But I think that
we use the word rhythms.
I like that.
Balance requires that everybody at one time is still. And we know with families that's never going to happen. And so we talk about creating healthy rhythms in our family. It's kind of how we describe it. How can we create healthy rhythms?
I like that. So talk about a couple rhythms that you have that are crucial to the other ones. Maybe some pillar rhythms, if I could give it a name or something. But
yeah, and I think really it goes back to what you just mentioned, your marriage. We believe, and we have seen it in our own lives, that so goes the marriage, so goes the family. And so meaning if I'm not, you know, if you're watching or you're listening, like, you know, right now how close you are to your spouse. You know, if you're emotionally connected to your spouse right now, and that ebbs and flows. There's times where we feel closer than we do with our spouse than when we don't. And so I think it's really important that we think through and pay attention to the rhythm. Like, when are we feeling maybe not so close to our kids, or we feel that our kids are a little bit out of sorts? And you know what, that might raise a red flag or a yellow flag to say, you know what, I need to put aside what I need to do tonight, and I need to spend one-on-one time with that child. You know, or I need to, you know, my wife and I need a date night. And so therefore, one of the things I need to do is I need to make sure that we find babysitters, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get that date night tonight. You know, so it's those types of rhythms. And then spiritually as well, you know, or do I feel connected to God? Do I not feel, you know, I think those rhythms for all of us, how close do we feel? And then my wife and I are very apt to say, you know what, something's not right now. We need to focus on us. We need to get that date night or that type of thing. So that's how we look at rhythms as opposed to balance, because I think balance is a really hard thing to quote unquote achieve. Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with that. I like that. Rhythms is a really good word. How do you guys step out of the everyday, the wheel that you can kind of get into, and reassess like how things are going? Like, do you guys have do you guys set it up like a weekly thing? Do you have a thing where you sit down at the table with a piece of paper in front of you? Is it formal? Is it just like, hey, after the kids go to bed, we lay on the couch and just process for 10 minutes? What's your thing that you do? Yeah, that goes into, I would say there's two different things that we do. Number one is we have the proactive and the reactive. The reactive is when things aren't going well and you don't feel close, and you start to call that out. So in other words, it might be when you start to get short with one another, right? Or you make a comment, you know, that's kind of condescending towards the other, or that type of thing. And we're quick to call it out and say, whoa, you know, what was that? Or where's that coming from? And we're able to take a step back and assess, well, you know what, I'm sorry. I just had a rough day with the kids or I had a rough day at work, or whatever it looks like. And we're able to go, okay, we need to take a step back here. We just need to look at what's going on, because we're a team. We call ourselves Team Straub. So, nice. You know, this is a team. And so when we start, we're not each other's opponents. And so when we start to see that there's, you know, competition between the two, and that we're fighting more against one another rather than for one another, then we kind of call that's a reactive kind of, whoa, wait a second. And so we're just trying to be aware, being mindful of those moments. And then the other one is proactive. So my wife and I shoot for a date night at least once a week. And usually that means we get about 3 times a month. We'll usually miss here and there. But if we're at least intentional with trying to get once a week, that date night resets us every single week. And that's kind of how are things? How are we? How are you? What's, and when you do that on a regular basis, what ends up happening is it really sets the tone for being able to have fun together. Because when things are continually going well, then all of a sudden you can go, okay, now we can have fun. We can just let loose and we can enjoy each other. And so I think that's been one thing. But again, I don't want to make this sound like, oh my gosh, we do this right and we've always done this right. Man, there were some hard years. Our kids currently are 3 and 5. And man, there were some really, really hard years that we've had to just, go through the trenches. We were surviving, not thriving. And I think it's okay to go, you know what, we're in a season right now where we're not going to hit 3 times a week, but we're going to do the best we can. Or maybe our finances can't afford that. So find other couples in your community that you can, date night flop with, switch babysitting with and share babysitting nights. You go out one night while you watch other kids and that type of thing. There's ways to do that if we're really, truly intentional, it really helps create those healthy rhythms. So
yeah, for sure, man. There's been times where, I've asked myself often, I think guys maybe ask this question more often than women, but I know women ask it too, but do I have what it takes? Right. I mean, it's like you're constantly, especially as guys, because we're so, we like the competition, we like the challenge in front of us, but oftentimes you're like, do I have what it takes? And I think in parenting, it honestly is the gauntlet, I believe, of like that whole mentality of do I have what it takes? Because it really does push you to the edge in some things that you really never thought you'd be pushed to the edge on. And you can come out better for it, or you can kind of crumble, at the challenge. But I think what we're talking about is specifically addressing it head on and saying, whatever questions are mulling in your head, like, am I doing this right? Do I have what it takes? Just know that consistency is key. I really believe that, we're not going to do it perfect, like you're saying. And I remember talking with a mentor one time and asking him, and I really looked up to him. He had raised 4 kids. He'd been married 40 plus years. I said, what's your secret to raising kids? And he said, there is no secret. You just every day in and day out, just keep doing it. Put your best foot forward, love your kids like as much as you can. And I think there's that element. And then there's the element of, okay, placing yourself around people who are doing it right, and right, I should say, but just, who have that intention that you're saying, that I want to love my kids. I want to put my marriage first. I want to raise my kids in a godly home, and I'm going to seek after those things that are going to make me a better parent. So, going into this next question, Josh, in the email that we had back and forth to each other, we talked about emotional safety being critical as it relates to brain development and future success for your kids. Talk to us about what that means.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things that we talk about is that when I talk about simplifying parenting, it's not going to make it any easier, but to simplify it, the way I describe it, it's the posture from which we parent, not the techniques that matters most. You talk about feeling like, am I enough, or do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
When we get caught up in all these techniques, it's so easy to go, man, I'm not getting this technique right or that. And we're getting caught in the day to day. But to simplify this as emotional safety, as simplified as I possibly can, really it comes down to this, that you have everything in you hardwired to be the best parent you can be. And when I say that is because our kids just want us. They just want us in face-to-face eye contact time. Really, kids spell love, Time. They want our time. Yeah. They want us to sit down with them. They want us to play with them. They want us to enter their world. And so that's really as simplified as I can to say emotional safety. You do have what it takes as a parent. You have everything hardwired in you to be a great parent. And so, when we describe emotional safety, and the reason that it became such an important piece for us is because when I studied the research, my counseling background is in the area of attachment. And when I started studying the research and I started to look at what this, and by the way, that's different from attachment parenting, by the way. It's different. So just so we're aware of that, attachment parenting is different from what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The thing with emotional safety was that every single major outcome we were looking for in our kids, whether it's good grades, whether it's being respectful, being kind, having self-control, finding a career as an adult, staying in that career and loving it, getting married, staying married, and enjoying their marriage. Having a faith that sticks, believing in God, having a faith that's hardwired, that they continue in. Yeah. Every single one of these outcomes that we desire were directly connected back to being in a safe relationship with their parent. Why is that? The reason is because there are so many things warring against our kids, so many things fighting for their attention, from peer pressure to advertisements to, you name it. There are messages and things warring against our kids' emotions that they need a safe place to land at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They need a safe place to land. And if that safety, if they're feeling shamed in the home, if they're feeling ridiculed in the home, if they're feeling like I'm not good enough in the home, if they're getting those same messages, they're going to go outside the home to find safety. This is why, this is why gangs are thrive. This is why, because kids want to find a place where they feel included, where they feel safe.
Yeah.
And so, at a very simplistic level, a safe environment, what it does is it calms the anxiety in the brain. So the brain grows from the bottom to the top. The bottom part of the brain, where the brain meets the brainstem, that's the amygdala. It's the fight or flight or freeze response. So when our kids are anxious, when they're overwhelmed, when they're throwing temper tantrums, or as teenagers, when they're talking back at us and they say, "Dad, I hate you," right? This is the fight or flight or freeze response. What's happening in that moment is our kids are not thinking straight. Our kids are not, because the higher functioning parts of the brain behind the eyes are known as the higher cognitive functionings. That's emotion regulation, cognitive flexibility, behavioral control, social skills, self-control. Okay. When our kids are anxious, overwhelmed, when something's going on in their life, if they can't come to us to have their brains calm down, they're going to go somewhere else to try to have that brain come down. And if they can't, they'll constantly live in this state of fight or flight. And you're never going to know what you're going to get with them. Kids who can successfully have their brains calm down when they're overwhelmed and anxious, what it does is it triggers those higher functioning parts of the brain: self-control, behavioral control, social skills, emotion regulation, cognitive flexibility. Well, what are all those cognitive skills linked to? Every outcome we're looking for in our kids. Healthy relationship development, good grades, you name it. And here's the other thing that I get a lot of men. This is why I speak to Joint Special Operations Command and military on this, is it also is linked to the ability to come through under pressure. I get a lot of men going, how does this resonate with men? We're just told to suck it up, and emotions don't matter. Well, the reality is, on the battlefield, yes, that's important and that's true. You need to be trained to allow your emotions to be shut down. But what about when you come home? The emotions are the very thing that cause you to thrive in your relationship with your wife and kids. So there's got to be a way to re-engage that and have that be important. And so that stress, and that it's really linked to that, because everybody looks normal when things are going well. It's not until we hit stress or duress that you see a person's true relationship style come out.
Yeah.
And so our ability to be present with our kids in those key moments, that's really linked to those outcomes that we're looking for in our kids. So, so that's an explanation of emotional safety. How, let me give you a quick illustration. I want to give you an illustration that I think will help kind of clear this up a little bit too. I was working with a dad of a 14-year-old, and she came home from school and wanted to go to a Friday night football game, and her dad said no. And what she did was she ran to a room and slammed the door shut, and she told her dad, she said, "Dad, I hate you." So the posture, when I talk about the posture of emotional safety, how many of us as parents, and I'm raising my hand here because this is probably like
I
me.
never do it, Josh. Yeah, we're perfect right here.
This would be, yeah, right. This would be like how many parents would go, don't you ever speak to me that way again. You go to your room, I'm taking your phone for a month, and no, you're not going to that Friday night football game. It's punishing the negative emotion. The other posture is to minimize it or to dismiss it and be like, don't be mad at me, or who cares? It's just a Friday night football game. The way I describe a posture of emotional safety is the ability, and when I'm speaking on this, I get down on a knee on stage and I get on the eye level of that teenager or that 14-year-old and our children and say, honey, what is it about that Friday night football game that matters to you so much? And what that dad found out about his daughter is that she had been rejected by a group of friends that she was previously hanging out with. And she would see them posting pictures on Snapchat and Instagram of them hanging out without her. And this was the first night that they invited her to be a part of something during that school year. And her dad said no. And so a lot of times what happens is when our kids are stressed and overwhelmed or they're throwing temper tantrums, there's something deeper going on. Yeah. And as a parent, our ability to get inside their world literally has a calming effect on their brain so that they can start thinking straight and problem solving for how to handle that situation. Now, does that mean that we don't give her consequences for being disrespectful? No, that's not what that means at all. But what it does mean, and the way I describe this, is that we lead in grace and we follow up in truth. Because truth without grace is always going to be received as condemnation. Yeah. So if we're just always coming down hard on our kids and all we're doing is punishing and all we're doing is, trying to speak truth and you just listen to me and there's no grace, there's no understanding, our kids are constantly living in this state of fight or flight and they never really truly calm to begin to think straight. Yeah. And so that's the link there of why emotional safety is so critical for the outcomes we're looking for in our kids.
Wow. And that most likely translates to adult relationships as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with our spouse. You were talking earlier about some ways that we connect with one another to create healthy rhythms. One of the things Christy and I started doing early on when I mentioned her adrenals were low and we had hit a wall, is I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start using feeling words. So it's easy for us all as young parents to put our kids down at bed at night and then turn on Netflix or turn on something to just kind of numb out the day. And, what we really encourage people to do is instead of turning on Netflix is to say, sit down with your spouse and begin just taking 10 minutes and processing each other's day, get to the heart of what really happened in each other's day and use feeling words. I was angry when this happened, or I was excited when this happened. And because what ends up happening is we don't use enough feeling words with one another, and we'll process the business of the day. We'll process, were the kids doing this and were the kids doing that, but we never get into the emotional level of our own hearts and minds within our marriage. And if we can get into a rhythm of doing that each day, what happens is you begin to create a rhythm where you're getting into the heart and mind of your spouse each day. And it's not just that you have to be intentional about it. Now, all of a sudden, you've created a rhythm where you're just doing that. My wife last night was wrapping Christmas gifts for our kids. And I said to her, I just walked by and I realized I hadn't really asked her about her. And as I walked by, I put my arm around her and I stopped for a second and I just looked at her and I said, how are you? Like, what's going on in your heart right now? And, that becomes natural when you do it more and more often. So
yeah. Wow. And have you ever had good experiences with journals? Like we've used a journal called the 5-Minute Journal. I don't know if you've heard of that, but sometimes it just helps put a skeleton, a framework around what you're talking about. Because I think as guys, sometimes it's hard for, especially in the communication realm. Sometimes whatever, you've had a hard day, you're like done talking, you're like, the last thing I want to do is like facilitate conversation. But then, it helps to have a sheet that just kind of guides you through the, cause we tend to be cavemen at times, or we're just like, all right, just tell me what to do. Like I go through the motions type thing, but we use a journal and it really helps because it's a gratefulness journal. but it asks questions like that. Like what were you most excited about during your day? What brought you the most happiness, things like that. Have you used any of
That's
that stuff?
amazing. No, we haven't.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to know
Okay.
more about it. That's
Yeah, it's
fantastic.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in those situations, Josh, where emotions can be high and you're, like you said with that dad, he stopped, if he would have stopped and addressed, why his daughter wanted to go, it would have solved a lot of the issues that came with, the whole situation. What do you recommend? Because I mean, when emotions are high, it's like, it's hard to stop in the moment and just think for a minute and say, okay, like I'm going to stop and ask a question. And sometimes a question is so hard to ask because, the emotion's high and you're thinking, okay, that means that I have to, calm down. And I don't, then the stuff that goes through our head at times is, like, I don't want to calm down. Like they need to hear this or whatever it is. How do you recommend somebody kind of step out of the situation and know when to ask a question like that? Like, is there,
and that's a fantastic question. And again, I'm going to go back to what I mentioned earlier. There's proactive and there's reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with our kids, because reactive in the moment, as I mentioned to you before, it's very easy to it's easy to be in the moment and say things we regret. It's easy to be in the moment and yell. It's easy to be in the moment. And why? Because we're imperfect. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. There's not a person on here, me included, you included, that isn't going to say something we regret or, be short with our spouse or something. And so there's two different ways that you can do this. Number one is being proactive. So what I'm going to go with my wife for a second. One of the ways that we're proactive is we have an enup in our marriage, an electronic nuptial agreement. So what that means is that we have guidelines for when we're allowed to use our phones and when we're not allowed to use our phones, so that the phone itself doesn't become a point of contention in our marriage, right? So there's a proactive way of saying, okay, here's something that's not going to, and we have a guideline, we have it written on paper, here's what we can resort back to so that it doesn't become a point of contention. Mm-hmm. Same thing can be true with our kids. You sit down with your kids, especially the older they are, the easier this becomes. You sit down with your kids and say, okay, curfew is 9:00 on a school night. Well, and it's 10:00 on the weekends or whatever that looks like. Well, if I want to stay out later or I don't come home at a particular time, here's my consequence, right? Here's what's taken away from me. And we're inviting our kids into those situations so that there's proactive and it's written on paper. It's, we help parents do this with media agreements with their teenagers. Like, when can they be on their phones? When can they not? Here's the rules as it relates to that. Same thing can be said for any type of rule within the home. The reactive is what's the most difficult, because you can teach this all day long, but the same thing is true. A lot of times, this is fascinating. I want to say this to you real quickly. There's a research study that shows it was a meta-analysis of all of the parenting strategies to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids. And it narrowed down the top 10 strategies across all these studies to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids. They asked these parenting experts what they thought, and they were wrong. Get this, okay? So a lot of us might think discipline would be in the top. Discipline was number 7 on the list. Seventh most effective parenting strategy to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids. Insane, right?
That's crazy.
So number one, it goes back to emotional safety. Number one, the single biggest one is love and affection. Love and affection is the single biggest parenting strategy to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids. Okay. 2 and 3 are going to blow you away. Number 2, the second most effective parenting strategy to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids, research shows, is a parent's ability to manage their own stress.
Wow.
So go back to emotional safety for a second and go back to exactly what you're asking me. How do we calm down when our kids are talking back at us, when they're throwing temper tantrums, and we ourselves are so stressed that we can't in the moment, do this? A parent's ability to manage their own stress is the second great, doesn't even have anything to do with a direct relationship with our kids. It has everything to do with who we are and who we're becoming as adults. And so, that's why it's important to step back. I believe in those moments. If you believe that you're going to react out of anger, or you're impulsive, or you're going to yell, the ability to be able to stop and just go, okay, in the moment, go say nothing, but to just step away. Maybe it's spilled milk, and your natural reaction is to just yell. I mean, think about that. How often would we yell at a stranger? If you were over at my house and if you spilled your drink, I wouldn't immediately think to yell at you.
Josh, that'd be awkward.
I know, it'd be so weird, but we do it to our kids.
You're right. No, you're right.
To be thinking about, are we treating our kids the way we would treat a stranger? Right? Because a lot of times when our kids mess up or they're acting out, it's hormonal, or it's an accident. It's usually childish behavior. Yeah. It's not that they were intentionally trying to do something wrong.
Right.
And so I really believe in those moments, taking a step back, taking a breath, taking 30 seconds, taking a minute, whatever it is, to say, listen, I need a moment. And so I just want you to stay here for a second, or have a chair that's kind of like a timeout chair, but yet isn't like a punishment chair, to say, we need to both take a breather. We're both out of control. And I want to show you, our kids become who we are. Yeah. Like, that's a scary thing. And so to be able to sit a child down in a chair, or to say, go to your room for a minute, we need a break, I'll be up to discuss this in a couple minutes. Just taking that a little bit, giving yourself that ability to take a couple minutes, just to take a step back and take a breather and collect your thoughts, collect your emotions, is so, so critical. Wow. And by the way, the third greatest parenting strategy to get the outcomes we're looking for in our kids is how you treat your spouse.
Wow.
Or how you treat the co-parent in a divorce situation. So who we are becoming as adults really is everything. And so I just really want to encourage the people listening. It is okay to focus on you. Your health matters dramatically as it relates to who your kids become.
Wow. Heard from the horse's mouth. That's amazing, man. Those are all words to live by for all of us, and I want to add this too, because when I think of ability to maintain stress, oftentimes I think of someone blowing up, or myself blowing up. But I'll say this too, is one time my wife, there was a frustrating moment. I don't know if it happens for you guys, but bedtime is like that time where you want to kill and you want to nurture all in the same breath. It's amazing.
Yes.
Two emotions reside in that one moment. But it was bedtime, like it naturally is. And, all that space all the way up until bed, you want to kill. And then once they're in bed, you're like, this is the most sweet moment of our entire life. It's just a crazy thing that happens. But I was about to explode, but the way that I react is I don't yell. I actually go inward. So I become like this kind of like cold-hearted, like silent person. And I told my wife, I'm like, babe, I'm controlled. I'm controlled right now. Like, look at me, like I'm controlled. And she's like, no, you're not. She's like, you're not controlled. Like, you think you're controlled because you're not busting out. But the kids can see all over your face that you're not happy. You're obviously stressed about the situation, and it can be worse because now you're walking around like a ticking time bomb. So I want to throw that out there to anyone listening, because stress comes in all different forms. And a lot of times we think, I'm this controlled person. Like, I don't have stress because I'm not showing it per se, but it's internal. So your cortisol is going through the roof, and now you're holding it all in. So maybe it's going to come out later, and you never know when it's going to come out. That's the problem. That's why, like Josh is talking about, getting it out in some way, shape, or form, sitting down for a moment and saying, hey, look, like, we got to let things cool off here so we can further express ourselves, so this stuff doesn't come out in other forms,
Well, and that's to your point exactly. The way I handle stress is I go to work. I work harder. Yeah. So yes, I'm not lashing out. I'm not doing the things that you are either. But what I am doing is I'm going to work. So, but what that does over time is it prevents me from being truly present with my kids, because my mind's not shutting down and I'm at work in my brain. Yeah. And so then you're not truly present with your kids. You're not truly present with your wife. And over time, that begins to that subtle fade away from each other's hearts.
Yeah.
That's where the rhythm is so important, and how stress plays a role in that. You're dead on, man.
Yeah. Are there any activities that you do, Josh, you and Christy do to, facilitate better communication with your kids? Like for instance, is there something you do at the dinner table? Is there something you do at bedtime? Or just maybe a tradition that you guys have that you use for, better family health?
Yeah, no, thanks. And one of the things that we did was we created, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's called 22/6 parenting. And so basically what it is it's what we needed, because, one of the things that's important to us is our faith and faith transmission. By the way, research shows that faith transmission, no matter your faith background, from one generation to another, the key factor to faith transition is warmth in the home. And so one of the things that we put together was this tool called 22/6 parenting, and we create morning prayers, dinner time, because what we want to do is we want to use the key times of the day that are already given to us to connect with our kids. So we have dinner time stories, bedtime questions. You talk about bedtime. We have bedtime questions we ask. We have morning time prayers that we pray with our kids, and then drive time games. We do when you walk along the way, or when you're driving, and so we really encourage, we have 0 screens at dinner time. There's no screens allowed in our home at dinner, at any meal time, actually. Because it's a time for our family to connect. And one of the things Christy and I will do is we have these story prompts where we'll just tell our kids stories about our history, about our lives, about, any fun thing that we can think of. They'll tell us stories about their day. We do questions at bedtime, anything from obviously what's your favorite part of your day to, if you could ask God anything, what would it be? What are you most thankful for today? The gratitude stuff that you were talking about. If you could be a cartoon character, who would you be? Like any cool, off the wall question to really begin to get them talking at bedtime. Those are some things that we really do to just really continue the conversation with our kids. The other thing I'll mention is this too. Research shows this over and over and over again, that if there's one key thing to do, that your kids are struggling, things aren't really going well in the home, I really want to encourage you to do this. 20 minutes of command-free time a day is gold for a child's brain. And it's gold for connecting your heart with theirs. What does that mean? Command-free time is entering their world. Especially if you have young kids, they're powerless most of the time throughout the day. So when you start to see your kids play, what you see them doing, our kids will, if we go to the doctor, they come home and they're the doctor and we're the patients. Or we go to the library and our daughter wants to be the librarian and we're the ones going and checking out her books. Play is their ability to regain power. And so if we can get 20 minutes of command-free time a day where we enter their world and allow them to dictate the play, it is gold for a child's brain. It is gold for a child's brain. So,
man, that's gold what you just dropped, because that is huge. I've found that, when my relationship with my girls and I have 3 girls, my relationship with them, specifically Allie, she's 6, is the strongest, or around those moments when it's the strongest, is when I am acting like a child and and asking her questions about things that, like, for instance, like we'll be in the garage and I'll act like I don't know how to hammer a nail. Like I'll just all of a sudden not know how to hammer a nail. And I'll act really just hitting the board, and I'll do it on purpose because I know she's paying attention. And she'll be like, "No, Daddy, you have to do it like this." And she'll show me. And it's such a beautiful thing, like you're saying. And I never put words to it, but you're putting words to it now. You're saying command-free, right? Command-free time. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So it's so huge. That time is so effective because it builds their confidence, and it also, builds the relationship up as well. Helps her to know that, okay, I mean, I can teach as well, and I can help Daddy, or I can help Mommy. And it's empowering for them to do those types of things.
And it leads to the fourth most effective parenting strategy in that study, which was helping our kids become independent, helping
Huge.
them find their strengths, helping them
Yeah.
find their passions, and really championing that in them. Yeah,
Wow.
it's
Wow.
huge. Exactly.
That is huge. That is huge. So this is a little bit of a deeper question, and you could have as long of an answer as you want. But I wanted to ask you, Josh, where do you get your validation from? Where do you get the I guess the know-how and the ability to say, you know, I'm moving my family in the right direction. You know, I'm raising my kids, you know, the best I know how, but obviously like this is a good direction. Like the helm of the ship is pointed in the right direction. Where do you get that validation from?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. You know,
Yeah.
I think originally, I want to first of all say this. I think there's something to be said for your earthly father and the blessing of an earthly father to kind of help guide and steer who you become in your life. I lost my dad a year ago this November. And so, you know, he instilled such an anchor. I would use the word anchor in my life that was really good. And I also, as I mentioned, you know, I'm doing this genogram, and my dad wasn't perfect. I mean, there were certain things that my dad didn't necessarily provide for me that, you know, I wish that he could have. But I also go, hey, he was a human being, and so and where I say that is particularly was the spiritual leadership. You know, I didn't see that in my dad. Now, my dad was always there for me. I can count on one hand the number of wrestling matches my dad missed when I was wrestling growing up, baseball games. He was at everything. He was always in the stands for me. Today, that spiritual component is such a major part of my own life. And so I have my earthly dad who gave me an earthly blessing that I believe wholeheartedly so indebted for to this day. And so I'm grateful for that. And then the second, even bigger tier of that is my heavenly father, and the Bible. I mean, I use, I use the Bible as my right and wrong, you know, like it is clearly, here's what's right, here's what's wrong. And we use that to teach our kids, here's what's right and here's what's wrong. We do that. We connect biblical scriptures to discipline. So whenever, you know, we're disciplining our kids, if they're fighting each other and they're not sharing toys, you know, one of the things they've learned is do unto others as I would have them do unto me. Do unto others as I want, or treat others as I want to be treated. Yeah. And so we teach them Philippians 2:3, treat others as better than yourself. If they're being lazy and my son doesn't want to unload the dishwasher, when I ask him, I'll say, buddy, what would the ant do? And Proverbs 6:6 says, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider his ways and be wise. So we teach the value of hard work through those scriptural lenses. And so that's really our guide. That's my guide as it relates to what I believe is right and wrong in the world. And so we just use those, integrity, being who we are, and that type of thing. And so it's really important for us. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, as we get near the end of the show, Josh, just a few pointed questions. Do you and Christy have a kind of like a time where you go through the goals for 2018? And if so, are there a certain number of, like retreats that you guys like to attend? And you can totally name drop if you want, if something that's spoken to y'all's life. Are there like, certain bigger events or experiences that help grow your marriage that you plan on each and every year? Do you guys do things like that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. One of the things I want to go back to as well is we have just to kind of combine the last question with this one, is we encourage families, and we have this in our own family, is we have a set of 5 values that we just really encourage couples to say, hey, get your 5 values as a family, the 5 values that drive who you are and what you do. Ours are ours number 1 are our faith, and we have scriptures tied to them, but ours is our faith. Second is family. So even when I'm speaking, my speaking engagements or job opportunities, anything like that, are all filtered through those first two lenses. Family, and then we have integrity, or doing what we do with excellence. Integer is anything divisible by one. So we see that as being who I am right now with you is who they're going to get when I walk, into the kitchen later today and see my kids and everything, like being who we are everywhere. And then, adventure is another one for us. We value adventure more than we value material possessions. So to answer your question, in 2018, we have trips that we take and places that we go. Orlando being one of them, your state, we come down there, and then empathy's the last one for us. Treating others is better than ourselves. Are we serving other people? And so for us, we like to love God and love others and have a lot of fun doing it, and have a lot of adventure. That's really our family. And so we filter every major decision we do through those values. And so what we'll do is we'll have I really encourage families to, one thing we do is we have a family vacation where it's just us as a family, just our immediate family, no other family involved. And so where we just kind of get off and kind of have our identity and establish ourselves as a family. My wife and I also do spiritual growth and development. We have a local, he's really a spiritual director for us that we meet with once a month. And so who's local and who's apart from our pastor and apart from our own church. We go to church on a regular basis, but we have a spiritual director that we meet with once a month as well, to kind of just really encourage us in our faith and that type of thing. And then, as it relates to events and conferences, I wouldn't say that there's any. With young kids, man, it's so hard to get for both of us to get to them. My wife, If Gathering is a big one for her. It's called If, I-F.
Okay.
If Gathering, and she'll do that, and she holds those events, and then she'll also attend the annual event in February. Jenny Allen is the woman who leads that. My wife is big with that.
Okay.
That's a big one for her. For me, I wouldn't say that it's as much events as it is more continuing education, and as much as it is maybe taking online courses and things like that. Those are the things that I really do, at least at this season, because I'm already gone so much for speaking and those types of things, that going and doing educational stuff is in this season. Absolutely. I want to live the message that I preach. And so I want to be home as much as I can. So we filter a lot of, again, goes back to those values and family. We filter a lot of our decisions, those 5 values. And so our 2018 will include a lot of adventure, and we do learn a lot. We grow a lot, but a lot of what I do is through Audible. I use Audible. I listen to tons of books on Audible. I'm constantly consuming content on there, and that type of thing. So
Well, speaking along those lines, are there any books that you've read that you would like to recommend to the listeners?
Yeah, I think one of them right now. Yeah, one of them right now that I'm really that I would really recommend is Dr. Carol Dweck's book called Mindset, and she really talks about between 2 different mindsets: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And it's a fascinating, phenomenal book. I would really, you talk about being superhuman. The growth mindset that's a fantastic read. I would really encourage that one for sure right now. Yeah.
That's cool. I've heard of that. So do you do Audible for stuff like that?
I do personally. I have books that I will listen to, and then if I really am devouring it, and I really am enjoying it, and I need to be writing, because I'm also a writer, man. I take tons of notes. Then I'll go buy that book, or I'll get it somehow. So I do a both, and I do a lot of, because of drive time, things like that. I just want to make the most of my time that I have, and so I'm listening to books, but then I'm also reading them as well.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
If you could pick one action step for our listeners to take from our conversation, what would it be?
Man, if this is coming out before Christmas, then I just really want to say, use your holiday, use your Christmas, or use the new year. Set those 5 values. That's what I would really encourage.
Huge.
Guide your family. Have 5 values. that guide your family, that you filter your decisions through, whether it's a job opportunity, whether it's a potential move, whether it's, are we going to even just go see family for the holidays? Are we going to do this on our own? Like, what does that look like? Have a set of 5 values that really guide who you are as a family. I would say that. And then if I can add just one more, the reason those values are so important is because we don't want to miss the moments. That I know the days are long, the saying, the days are long, but the years are short. It is so true.
It is.
And man, get in those 20 minutes of command-free time with your kids. Just enter their world and love those kids, man, with everything you got.
So powerful, man. Because it's so true, man. Once you start raising kids, I feel like 2017 just disappeared. Like I'm like, is this the fastest year that we've been through so far? Like I was talking to Lauren about that. And it's just, like the kids are in their prime and there's been a lot of things that have kind of been rites of passage per se in the kids' lives, like Allie going like to ride horses now and things like that. And things are just moving. So, what you just said resonates so much. And lastly, Josh, where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your mission?
Yeah, you can go to joshuastraub.com, joshuastraub.com, just cool. My full name. Yep.
Okay. And that's Straub.
That's Straub. That's correct. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Josh, I can't thank you enough for coming on and dropping some serious knowledge bombs on myself. I have a whole page of notes here that I took. Amazing stuff that you dropped. Anything else that you want to say before we start to dwindle down the show?
Oh, man. There's so many things in my brain, but I feel like we've come to a good close. I would just, I would really encourage people to, at the end of life, I hear this exactly what you're saying too, about the time flying, and it's, from people that I hear who are older than me, we surround ourselves, like you said, with people who have already been there and who really mentor us. From what I hear, it doesn't go any slower. It just continues to get faster. Yeah. And so, man, I would just really say at the end of life, some of the regrets that I hear from people the most. I literally hear from billionaires who tell me I would give it all just to have a relationship with my kids again. Like, don't ever do whatever you can to not get there at the end of life. Wow. Wow. Be famous at home. Be famous at home.
I love it. You need to make a shirt, man. You need to make
famous at home.
Absolutely.
We're working on it. We're working on events this year called Famous at Home. Famous at Home events. Yeah.
Well, see, there you go. Okay. So I'm going to leave everybody with that because that's just powerful. I think we all need to let that sit in. And this season is, to me, the most powerful season to do it in, because it really does. You're reflecting on your year and you're asking yourself, what am I on this earth for? Am I truly living that purpose? And ultimately asking, what am I chasing? And whatever it is you're chasing out there, you don't need someone or something to tell you who you are, right? You already have your worth in a God that loves you, whether you like it or not. And so I would just say, recognize, like Josh just said, recognize your worth, your value, truly where it comes from, and stop chasing the things that are going to fade away. Like Josh just said, speaking to billionaires, wishing that they could go back in time and take it all back to have that one relationship. So maybe you have that one relationship in your life. I hope you're cultivating it. I hope you're taking time to really pay attention to it, whether it's your wife, your kids, the family around you, and pay attention to the love around you. That's the most important thing we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on with Josh and I. It's an honor just to have a conversation with all of you. Merry Christmas to you. Go spend time with your families. Love every moment, every second. Take time to breathe. Take time to be. Come out of a position of rest instead of doing. And I look forward to next year and an even better one than before. Thank you, everybody. Be superhuman.